Hello, this is Mike Woodruff. Welcome to Beneath the Headlines, where I host a monthly conversation with authors and thought leaders about the ideas that are shaping our lives. Beneath the Headlines is a production of Lakelight Institute. Today I'm joined by Dr. Darren Whitehead. He is the author of The Digital Fast, 40 Days to Detox Your Mind and Reclaim What Matters Most. Good conversation. Dr. Whitehead is a pastor. He planted a church in Nashville, Tennessee, Church of the City, which has grown to become a quite a large church. He was on staff at Willow Creek here in Chicago before heading down there. He did a doctorate of ministry at Capital Seminary, and as you will soon discover, he is not from here. He has that Aussie accent, a wonderful Aussie accent. So I'm very excited about this book. I think almost everybody has some awareness that their relationship with technology needs a little bit more thought and attention. And we talk a bit about Jonathan Haidt's work that has been so influential across the spectrum, not just the church, but really the broad culture, recognizing that our relationship with smartphones and social media is racing in directions that are not helpful. And so their church did a fast, a digital fast, and it's a little different than what you might think. And I am very excited. Christ Church is going to do this this Lent. I am going to do it even though I'm out on sabbatical. I recommend this book. It's a very quick, easy read, and we will be using the workbooks here at Christ Church when we're doing this program this Lent. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Darren Whitehead about his book, The Digital Fast. Dr. Darren Whitehead, so good to have you here today. Thank you for giving us some time in a very busy moment.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for those listening in, we are recording this the third week of December, which is a very busy time for a pastor.
It is.
I say that as one who knows, and I know that you're going to have lots of services and you got lots of things going on this week. So how are you faring amidst the December onslaught?
You know, I love this time of year. You know, I've been a pastor for 27 years, so I've done this a while. And my family know that it's a particularly busy time. And so we try to pace ourselves accordingly. And, you know, it's a remarkable thing. You know, I'm not from the United States originally. I'm from Australia.
You did not have to say that.
Right.
We all knew. Yeah.
So it's an amazing cultural phenomenon that you guys have here in this wonderful country. The New Testament is predominantly go and tell the gospel. And a couple of times a year, it's a come and hear. Yep. And it's really remarkable. It's really remarkable that thousands of people who do not know the Lord are going to sit in a room and be still and listen to me tell them about Jesus. I mean, how remarkable is that?
Right. It is a wonderful thing, and I am aware, I'm sure you're aware, we have one of the few privileged voices remaining. It's unlikely someone's going to stand up and tell us to shut up or that we're an idiot. And they may be thinking that, but we get a runway. So it is a great thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, a little inside baseball. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but yes, Christmas is a busy time of year, but I don't think it is as busy for pastors as everybody thinks, because we cancel a lot of things that don't happen during the week.
That's true.
And so yes, they just look and they go, wow, you got 9 services happening on Christmas Eve. How are you going to do it? And you're like, yeah, poor me. Meanwhile, you're like, but I didn't have any meetings this week.
That's right. No, it's
more meeting, and
it's a great excuse to opt out of almost everything else.
So you have written a book, The Digital Fast, and thank you for it. A great book, an easy book to read, an important book, an helpful book. And it feels to me like you hardly need to make the case for this book. I mean, in many cases, you sort of have to lay out and say, I want to tell you about X, and this is why X is important. But it feels to me like most people know, yeah, my life is a little crazy. I'm a little bit too addicted. I think 57% of people admit that they're addicted to their phone or to social media, or somehow they've got life is a little bit upside down. So you don't have to make that case, but let me give you an opportunity.
Well,
this is a problem.
The simplest way to make the case is to ask someone, how's it going for you? How do you feel like your relationship with technology is? It's been years since I've heard someone answer that in a positive way. And this is the thing, right? The iPhone was invented in 2007, the June of 2007. It began as a universally positive device, but it didn't have social media. It didn't have push notifications. It didn't have a front-facing camera or, games, or all of sort of the wormholes of distraction didn't exist on it to begin with. But these different applications have seeped their way into our lives. And somewhere along the last, sort of trajectory of time, the device that we used to have mastery over is somehow mastering us. And if you ask someone, have you ever done a digital detox? Just about every single person answers the same way. No, but I need to.
So this will be playing, this podcast. We're recording it in December, and it will air in January. In our church, I will be on sabbatical at that point. Our church is going to go through this your 28-day program, and I will go through it. And my wife will likely not need to go through it because she's very disciplined on these things.
That's great.
And I get to see her example on this, as well as other things. So. But I'm looking forward to it. And the last time I had a sabbatical, so this I guess back up 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I remember the first Sunday I had off. So I had all these things planned for the sabbatical, but the first Sunday I had off, and my wife has a full-time job, and so she's not on sabbatical.
Right.
So, but she was going to continue to attend the church. I went to another church, and I'm sitting there. First day of my sabbatical, and I'm sitting in this church, and I realized I was checking my phone during the sermon like every 3 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, wow, I have a problem. I did not realize." And it was it was one of those moments where I said, "Okay, I've just got to back off this thing," but. I guess you would say there's a dopamine hit, or there's just it's a habit or something. But yes, I've been conditioned to just stay in this state of sort of high alert.
Yeah, it's almost an involuntary action now. We tend to check our phones when we get a push notification. We also tend to check our phones when we don't get one to see whether maybe we missed one. And I think the way that these devices have really impacted our lives, it's that we often use them as a distraction. So when you feel an unpleasant feeling, when you feel bored, when you feel sad, when you feel anxious, when you feel afraid, when you feel shame, we grab these devices and we look at some sort of visual candy that distracts us away from an unpleasant feeling. And it's very much a subconscious thing that we do, in addition to the dopamine hit that you were talking about. The dopamine, we look at these devices so much that there is research now that shows that dopamine is no longer doing in our brains what it's supposed to do, because dopamine we've had an over saturation of dopamine. And so dopamine is supposed to produce joy. It's supposed to produce pleasure. It's supposed to make you happy. And we have had such an oversaturation of these dopamine hits that it stops doing that in our brains now.
Was there a moment when you decided, I need to write a book on this?
So originally, I have 3 teenage daughters. And I, like a lot of dads, try to prioritize doing one-on-one dates with them, allow them to choose the restaurant, and this is just a chance for us to be undistracted and to look at one another, and me really to explore what is going on in the hearts of my girls. And a couple of years ago, we did this on a particular week, and I'd planned to do all 3 in a particular week. And I was feeling quietly confident about my dad game. I'm close to my daughters. And so I thought, I'm going to ask my girls the same two questions. The first question is, what's dad doing right that he needs to do more of? And what's dad doing wrong that he needs to do less of? And when I asked them what am I doing right, they all had different things. They said that they like when I take them to school in the morning. They like when I make them laugh. They like when I trip and fall and hurt myself at home, do more of that. They like certain aspects of what I do. When I asked them what is dad doing wrong, unconnected to one another, they said the same thing. We wish you didn't spend so much time on your phone. And like our kids are able to hold up like a mirror of truth to us, I felt really ashamed that I was exchanging the infinitely valuable time with my daughters, and every parent who has children that are older than mine tell me that these years are fleeting, and I know these years are fleeting. And I'm exchanging that for doom scrolling cat videos on Instagram, you know? And so
I'm proud to say I've never watched a cat video, but other than that, you've got me feeling convicted.
So what happened was that was like a condensed moment for me just as a parent. Like, I think I got a problem. We start out the year, every year in our church, we do a 21-day season of prayer and fasting. And a lot of people started to say, I need to fast from my phone. And I thought, that's good, but that's different than what biblical fasting is. And I started to think, I don't want people to do either or. I want them to do both. So I want to actually divide this experience. And I want to see what it would be like if as a church, we decided to do a digital fast together. Now, I was really nervous about this. I was really insecure about leading our church through this. I just thought that people were going to be like, what are you talking about, man? Stick to teaching the Bible, stay in your lane. But it turned out to be one of the most profoundly transforming things we've ever done as a church. And the best ideas, I didn't even realize before we started this. The reason this really works is what social scientists call a collective action problem. Collective action problem is something where we all know that a certain behavior is detrimental to us, but we don't want to step back from it for the fear of missing out. If you ask a teenager, if Instagram makes you feel insecure, then why don't you get off Instagram? And they say, I can't. All my friends are on Instagram. I'll be completely left out. But you see, what happens is if a community goes together, if collective action is taken to address a collective action problem, then instead of feeling FOMO, instead of feeling like you're the only one that's missing out, you actually experience JOMO. It's the joy of missing out. You're actually missing out as a community together. And it turns out it's so much easier to do if you do it as a community. So when I started sharing this idea with the church, we had all these people that were going, I've never done a digital fast, but now my church is doing it. I need to. It's kind of like, if not now, then when?
Right. I do suspect that everybody listening has had moments where they have just realized, oh, I think maybe I sort of have a problem here, or at least I'm close to it. I shared the whole, when I was at this church and I had to just keep checking my iPhone. Even when I realized I was doing it, I kept doing it. Like it's when you're fasting, I'll say, when I'm fasting, I'll go, okay, I'm fasting. Yes, I'm feeling hungry now. Okay. Yes, I'm fasting. And I go, okay, so I'm going to use this opportunity to think about the Lord or to pray or to whatever. And then, but first I'm going to go get something to eat. It's immediately back there. And you're just in this pattern that you got to break. I had a scary moment. I think this was 2 years ago. It might have been last Christmas. Probably 3 years ago now. But I read that TikTok had whatever, $8 billion downloads a month or something. I'm like, I've never heard of this thing. How in the world could this, what is this? And I mentioned it to one of my boys. Like, oh, Dad, you just don't know. You've done it. You just don't realize you've done it. And I said, well, give me the app. So they downloaded the app, and I'm playing around with it. And it was Christmas time, and I remember, because they were around, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night. This is probably day 3, and realizing that I was on my iPhone. It's like 2 a.m, and I am doing TikTok videos, and it's like I literally just said, "Oh, Houston, we have a problem."
Yeah.
I lack the moral muscle or whatever skill I need to get away from this thing. So I took the app off, right away, and I said, I can't do this. So
That's wise. TikTok, researchers found that TikTok is the most addictive app.
well, yes, I said, wow, I'm impressed by whoever has designed this algorithm, and it was also a little frustrating and embarrassing because I'm seeing all these TikTok videos it was marriage humor. It was sort of exercise advice to old people. I mean, I was just like, oh, yeah, this isn't who I want to be. I don't want them to know this stuff about me. So, yeah, and I had a friend, and we get together, 3 of us, and we call it 2+1, 2 affirmations and a challenge. So I want to affirm this. I see this in your life. I really appreciate this. You did this. Well, you're a good guy. And then a challenge, like, here's something I think you got to work on. And then we end with an affirmation. And it's a long, these are hour-long sessions and very helpful and very intentional and very intense. And this one guy, to go unnamed, but both of us had said, your challenge is you keep checking your phone. We're having these important conversations.
Wow.
And you look at your phone, and I want to reach over there and smack you the next time you're going to do it. So we both have this same challenge to him, which is sort of odd. And he says to us, well, you guys sound like my wife. And we're like, oh, really? And I say, just for the record, this is what we said to you last year.
Wow.
But it was very hard for him to, and he justified it. And I guess I want to say this idea of a digital fast, it seems like I can't do this because I have a job. I have to stay in touch with people. I have to, when somebody first said to me, we want the church to do a digital fast, and you're gonna get rid of your digital devices. And I said, well, I just got on a United flight yesterday, and I used my United app to get on the plane. How am I going to get on the plane? And they go, yeah, that's not it. So walk us through this thing, Darren. First of all, what exactly is a fast?
Yeah.
And then secondly, what are you calling people to? What does this look like?
Yeah. So that's a great setup for explaining all of this. So when we were working on this, we were really thinking through, like, there's got to be somewhere in between addiction and Amish, right? We've got to find somewhere that is like, we're not calling people to get your smartphone and smash it up with a hammer or throw it away. We want people to think about the apps on their phone through the lens of utility versus
amusement, entertainment.
Yeah, we've got to think about distraction versus utility. So distraction apps are things like social media and games and news and video apps and email. Try to get the apps that you find yourself when you pull up at the lights and you grab your phone and you start scrolling. These are the things that are the wormholes of distraction. We want people to reduce your smartphone to a utility device. A utility device is things like phone and text, calendar, GPS, the United Airlines app. You see, the thing is, when you got on that flight with the United Airlines app, you didn't then get on the plane and play with the United Airlines app for the next 47 minutes. You see, it's not a distraction app, it's a utility app. So this is not calling people to not use technology. It's calling people to remove all of the distraction apps off of your phone. And what happens is that then when you have no distraction apps, you don't have news apps, you don't like the things that take your time, you will, for the first few days, open your phone and realize that there is nothing distracting to look at. You're not really going to play with your calculator, And so the call on the 28 days is 4 7-day movements. The first 7 days is to detach. You've really got to, and like any sort of low-grade addiction, you will feel some sort of withdrawal because you're not looking at social media all the time, or you're not looking at news apps, or you're not on YouTube, or whatever it may be. The next 7 days is to discover. Discover is what you begin to notice now that your head is not buried in a glowing rectangle all the time. And you notice things about the people around you, about your children, about your spouse. You notice things about yourself. You even notice things about the voice of God. Like, how much have we chased away the Spirit's ability to speak to us? Because every discretionary moment, every gap in our lives, instead of saying, Spirit of God, what should I be paying attention to? We're standing in line at the grocery store and we're staring at our phone. We're waiting at the airport, we're staring at our phone. We're waiting at the traffic lights, we're staring at our phone. And so when you're not doing that anymore, you start to discover all these things that you weren't noticing before. The third movement, the third 7 days, is to delight. And what happens is, as I was referencing earlier, that dopamine is no longer doing in our brains what it used to do. It takes several weeks for the dopamine receptors in our brain to reset. And then what happens then is they reset to normal, and then you start experiencing dopamine the way that God intended. And so you actually start to experience pleasure again. And it's really funny. It's like rediscovering how to be human again. It's like your senses reset. I remember when I was doing a digital fast in this particular season, in this moment, my youngest daughter at the time said, Dad, come and watch me jump on the trampoline. I didn't have my phone with me, wasn't carrying it in my back pocket. It was in a drawer in my house. And so I went outside, and all of these things, Mike, that I paid attention to, like I felt the grass under my feet. I smelled the air. I looked up and I saw that the sun was about to set and there was wind on my face. And then I heard my daughter giggling and saying, watch me, Daddy, watch me, Daddy. And I had this conscious thought, this is a better life. This is a better life. So it is delightful when you get into the third week of this. The final week is to determine. Now that I have reset my relationship with my smartphone, how do I engage with technology as I'm moving forward out of these 28 days, out of this digital fast? And we encourage people to, I write about this in the book, to Marie Kondo your digital world. Marie Kondo was famous for helping people clean out their closets.
Simplify. Yeah.
Right. And she asks people to take items of clothing and then look at them and say, does this item of clothing spark joy in me or not? And if it doesn't, throw it out. If it does, you keep it. So as you're moving out of a digital fast, ask yourself, does having Instagram on my phone spark joy? Does having Facebook or X or TikTok, having news apps, does this spark joy? This is not a call to never get on Instagram ever again in your life, but maybe you don't have Instagram on your phone. So you might have Instagram on an iPad, or you may use it on your desktop, but you don't have it like an appendage attached to your body where you are constantly tempted to look at something 46 times a day. It is taking technology and our relationship with technology and applying health and parameters and allowing us to have mastery over them instead of them having mastery over us.
Well, Darren, you are making a strong case. I'm at the time that people get this, I will be on sabbatical, and I have been looking forward. So for this sabbatical, this is my third sabbatical. I've been here 25 years, and we decided, Sherry encouraged me early as we were talking about this. She goes, you ought to not write a book. You ought to work on your head, not your heart. Which, as you can imagine, seems like a lot more work than, like, I know how to write a book, work on my heart. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been talking with people about this, and I'm going to start with a 3-day silent retreat.
Good for you.
And what I so look forward to, because I have, I have understood that part of what I can be to people, part of what I need to be, whether I'm doing it or not, but is to be the non-anxious presence, to not be connected. And this does cause, I'm hard for a lot of people to get a hold of, and I feel poorly about that. As a pastor, I want people to be able to get help immediately. It's just seldom is it me that they're going to get a hold of.
Sure.
But I've tried to explain this to say, look, if you want me to be settled, peaceful, collected, then I can only do the fast, immediate, responding instantaneously for a few windows during the day when I'm going to do this. Otherwise, I really think what I can do, or what I should do, is to be unplugged, to be still, to be alert. And I so look forward to, but I say that, and then it's hard to maintain.
It is, yeah.
And I am looking forward both to the sabbatical and the silent retreat, but I'm also looking forward to this fast as a chance, and especially to do it with others.
Yes.
As a chance to, step back and to be more intentional. And I just wrote a book on the news, and the basic argument is you have to manage your heart.
Yeah.
Like this is a dopamine hit. They're trying to make you angry. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on out there. And that's the world in which, at this moment, in God's providence, you're living. So you can manage your heart, but you're going to have to turn it off in order to do that. Now, all that to say, you've designed this and you've been doing this. And what I saw in your book was that at least the first time you did it, 100% of the people who did it said, this was a good thing. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. That has continued to be true. So our church has done it twice now as a whole church. And 100% of people say, I'm glad I did this. No one says, I really wish I'd spent more hours doom scrolling. No one says that. Everyone is glad they do it. It is, in varying degrees, uncomfortable to begin with. Just like your silent retreat, you'll feel bored to begin with, and then you'll probably cross over into this moment of just like feeling more present and more at peace than you felt for a long time. Like, we need to detox our souls. We need to detox our brains, And 100% of people are glad they did it. And when you're doing it as a community, you're kind of going on a journey together. Some people find it really hard to get off social media, but they have friends that they can talk to about how hard they're finding it, and they can get encouragement, like, stay the course. You'll be glad you did this.
So you've done this several times. You've written a book about it. You're the digital fast expert. So how much did you design back into your life?
How much what did I do when I came out of it, do you mean?
So, well, you've talked about, you got to detox, and then you discover, and then you delight, and then you design. Okay, this is how I'm going to use this. This is how I'm going to use my smartphone.
Yeah.
So how much of, because I will say this, the Amish seem more attractive. The older I get, I just think, wow, I think the Amish had it figured out. But I am not Amish, and I do have a day job, and I do have people I want to stay in touch with. So, and I do need, the a lot of the apps that are utility apps. So I guess I'm just asking, how much, do you get sucked down the wormhole again, or you're pretty disciplined and you're staying on top of this, and you only look at your cell phone 4 times a day, or where have you landed?
Yeah. So I have different seasons where I do better than others. When I'm at my absolute best, my rule, my digital rule of life is to not have social media on my phone. And we did a survey after we did it, and we found I think it was 49% of people following the digital fast did not put social media back on their phone. So you kind of have two kinds of people.
Just define. So, just give us a working definition of social media. You're talking about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah.
What?
TikTok.
Anything else?
Yeah,
TikTok.
there's a lot of lesser known social media platforms, but generally it's kind of the crowdsource content. User generated content is what they used to call it. Social media, we used to actually call social media networks. When it was first invented, it was a social network. It's the idea of connecting with lots of people. And somewhere along the line, that morphed from network to platforms. We now talk about platforms, social media, social platforms. And a platform is an idea of projecting yourself to a crowd of people. It's less about networking and more about projecting. And there's so much about that that's very unhealthy. I don't think that social media is 100% detrimental to society, but it's close. And it has a devastating impact on teenagers, particularly teenage girls. So that there used to be no research on this. There used to be no conclusive research on mental health and the correlation and causation with social media. But that's not true anymore. Now,
Jonathan Haidt's work, and I've been saying this. I've recommended that book. I've recommended Andy Crouch's book on the TechWise family. I bought copies, handed them to my kids, handed them to other people. And I heard from somebody, I said, look, I think that in 10 years, we're going to look at social media for kids like we look at smoking.
yes.
Are you going to give your kids cigarettes when they're 13 and say, hey, this would be a good idea?
Right.
Or are you going to say, oh, no, this is really, really a bad idea? And it may or may not be, there's all kinds of First Amendment and freedom issues when you're talking about these things with adults. But I think we are increasingly seeing, not just Christians, but we're seeing Jonathan Haidt, who describes himself as I think he describes himself as a liberal Jewish atheist. He's, I think, very highly of Haidt. I obviously disagree with him on those things.
Yes.
But he writes, and he's like sounding the alarm as loudly on this for kids as anybody is.
I'm very, very thankful for Jonathan Haidt's work. I've got to talk with him about what we did. He recently published an article on our church doing this on his platforms. And he is very faith-friendly, despite being an atheist himself. And he was really the one that helped me understand and helped me define from a collective action problem itself why it was so helpful in a church context. Because these sub-communities can go on this journey together. And so he's very, very excited about churches doing this. On the issue with teenagers and parenting, there's a lot of parents who've given their kid a smartphone and their kids are on social media. And what I want to say is, like, there's no judgment and there's no shame. There hasn't been conclusive evidence until recently. So a bunch of parents did what I did when my girls were old enough to do sleepovers at their friends' houses or play school sports. I grabbed an old iPhone from a junk drawer in my kitchen and I fired it up and I gave it to them. I just didn't know any better. But we do know better now. And so some parents say, well, it sort of feels like the ship has sailed. And to those who I would say, if you knew a ship was going to go down, if you knew a ship had some fundamental problems with it, you would turn the ship around. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage, like if you're a parent and you have young children that have smartphones and social media, do a digital fast as a family together. Take 28 days and say, we're going to do this together. Mom, dad, kids, we're all going to do this together. And then let's have a conversation after that on what it should look like moving forward.
And the stats that I've heard, there's a number of schools, it seems like it started about a year ago or 2 years ago, but they said, we're going to require everybody to turn in their cell phones when they walk into the classroom. And I have some friends that are college professors, and they say, that you come in, you give me your cell phone, it sits right here, and nobody can look at it during the class. And everybody's loving this. I mean,
Loving
all the
it.
schools are like, we do not want to go back. This
Loving
is
it.
so much healthier.
Yes. And there's not one reason to get smartphones out of schools. There's like 20 reasons. I mean, they bring so much havoc, let alone the fact that kids are walking around with a video camera all the time, and they're in restrooms, and they're sharing pictures of one another. And, these kids, they'll have their phone under the desk, even if they're not supposed to have them, and they're scrolling on their phones. So getting them out of schools is a very, very positive experience. And I credit Jonathan Haidt being one of the loudest, clearest voices on this subject.
I agree.
And he has had, I think we're going to look in history and go, this guy had an impact on the world in the way that he was speaking about this.
So let me ask some more specific questions. The ironic question I'm going to ask, and I didn't realize it was ironic until I started to frame it. We're recording a podcast. So one of the things that I've been wrestling with, and I used to run, and when I ran, I never listened to a podcast. I was a runner, and it was downtime, and it was stress relief, and I just ran, and that was fine. And then I started to carry a cell phone with me, in part because I was older. I had some health issues, and my family's like, you've got to be able to reach us if you're off on your own and nobody knows where you're at. Okay. So then I realized as I've stopped running and started to transition to walking, or I now do a lot of running with intermittent walking, I can make phone calls. Like, I can get some work done. And then I started listening to podcasts, and I'm like, okay, do I just need to unplug all this? So hey, we're recording a podcast. I listen to certain podcasts. So do you listen to podcasts?
I do listen to podcasts, but in Felicia Wu Song, who's a social scientist and a university professor, she has this concept, which is, when you hear it to begin with, it makes you smile. But she says we need to recapture the idea of monotasking. Monotasking is doing one thing at a time. So she suggests, like, when you're driving, don't have a podcast on. Right. Don't listen to music. Like, what would it look like for you to just drive?
Right.
Or she said that the really, really, like, Jedi level performers are the ones that can go and wait at a terminal for an airplane.
Right. And
do nothing.
Yeah. So there was a tweet with somebody who said, and it went viral, and it says, I'm in a coffee shop, and the guy sitting at the table next to me is not doing anything. He's not on his phone. He's not reading. He goes, completely freaking me out. And you go, yeah, that's what we used to do.
It's like, he might be a serial killer. He's not doing anything. Yeah. Right. So I think that I don't think podcasts are in the same category of distraction as Instagram Reels or TikTok scrolling. I don't think that's the same thing. But I do think that if all of your discretionary time, all of your time driving, running, doing things is clogged with extra content, you are missing out on having legitimate spaces in your life to be centered, to be listening to the voice of God, to be growing in self-awareness. How am I doing? Exploring, sort of the inner parts of your world. If you have a ton of noise coming at you all the time, then you are robbing yourself of that.
First Kings 19? I think Elijah, God didn't show up in the storm. He didn't show up, and he showed. It was the still small voice, and that convicted me a number of years ago, and I added to my day, starting with silence for a while, and it's. I mean, sometimes it's only 5 minutes, but. Yeah. I want the popcorn popper in my head to stop popping.
Yeah.
And so people say, well, are you praying? And I go, not really. Like, it's not my intention to pray, although I'm trying to listen, but I'm basically just trying to let my brain settle, because it seems like even in sleep, there's dreams and there's activity, or it's just not. It's not a silent time in the way that just sitting silently and letting thoughts settle, and that's been an important thing. And so I think about this when I'm out walking or running in the forest. I think it's the Japanese that talk about forest bathing or something. Just to be outside and. And I think if I've got a podcast on, it doesn't count. Because I'm not alert to the trees and the birds and the wind and yeah. Well, so Darren, we're running out of time. I have a few sort of standard questions that I like to ask at the end. So the first question is there anything that, and just quick answer, is there anything that's keeping you up at night? Like you're worried about X, and if so, what is it?
I have 3 daughters who are growing up as daughters of a pastor, and we planted our church 12 years ago, so kind of their entire childhood has been watching our church go from a very small church to a large church. And I have seen over the years kids grow up as sons and daughters of pastors really be resentful towards the church. The church is the thing that tends to take their parents away, distracts them, and all of that. The thing that I long for with all my heart, the thing I pray for, is that my kids would love the Lord and love the church and not feel like the church was the great competition for their time. And by God's grace, right now, my kids love our church, and they're really involved, and so that is the thing that I carry with me.
So as a side point, I've asked this question, 40 times, and 100% of the time, people have said their kids. Doesn't matter who I'm talking to, politicians, authors, pastors, whoever it is.
Yeah.
When we're talking about geopolitical issues, and I say, "What keeps you up at night?" Oh, my kids. My kids. So
that's really interesting.
What thing? And this could be a book, this could be a podcast, this could be an Amazon product, this could be a movie, this could be anything. What thing have you been recommending to others or giving away or just saying, "Oh, you gotta listen to this, or you gotta see this, or you gotta read this"? In the last few years, is there something, and you could say your book, The Digital Fast, but anything that is just sort of this article, you've got to read this article, whatever that might be.
So I certainly have given away The Anxious Generation to a lot of people, which is a book we referenced earlier from Jonathan Haidt. There is a book that I have been reading lately that is by a guy named Justin Brierley. And it's the
British guy,
right? Yeah.
Yep.
He used to do a podcast called Unbelievable, where he would pit different theological positions against one another, and very, very interesting. He's more recently got on his own. He's written a book about it's the title's long, but it's like the surprising rebirth
of faith or something.
Yeah, Christianity, and in it he's kind of pulling all of these observations about how the neo-atheist movement is sort of collapsing on itself. And I find that really stirring in my heart. Just there are all of these globally recognized intellectuals who are coming to faith right now.
Right.
You think Jordan Peterson and...
Yes, I have been noticing this, and some of the shift towards faith, and Brierley would say this as well, it's been embracing Christianity as sort of a juggernaut to stop the spread of Islam or the collapse of secularism. I mean, Richard Dawkins saying he's a cultural Christian. He's clearly not suggesting that he's a Christian, but there is this celebration of faith and this recognition of faith. And some people, Ayan Hirsi Ali, have come to a sincere faith in Christ. Very fun to see and interesting to see. And
it feels like we're in a different moment right now.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It's like the tectonic plates are shifting. And it's difficult to discern in real time when you're living it. Right. But I do think that we're going to look back on this era and there is like a spiritual appetite that is growing. And I think some of it comes from that with all the advances in technology, with all the advances in medicine, with all the advances in comfort and wealth, people are more anxious than they've ever been.
Right.
And so there is this appetite to return to the ancient sources of wisdom and literature. And I think that there is this like sense of maybe we go back to the writings of Solomon in the Old Testament. Maybe there's something to be found. Maybe there is treasure to be found in this. And that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of excitement as a faith leader in the community.
We are finishing. We're working on developing the next strategic plan for the church. Next 5 years. Where are we at? What do we need to do? Right? All that stuff. And I've done this dance a lot of times, and this time, what I have found through all the sessions, all the lists. Let's do the SWOT analysis. Let's listen to this. Let's read this. Let's look here. I've come away and I've said, I think the next 5 years will be characterized by more headwinds against faith. There will be more pushback and anger and cultural winds, but there's also going to be more people coming to faith.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't think we're ready for either of those like we need to be. I lead a study for skeptics, and it's sort of a rotating study. And recently, people in this class who are not necessarily skeptics, they just don't know anything. They're like, I've never been to a church. I don't know anything about God at all. And I'm asking questions like, have you heard of Jesus? Just like at all.
Yeah.
It's very different, but some of them have they come to faith and it's a sincere, joyful experience. And I'm like, I don't really know how to decide. We're not set up to help you when you say, I've never heard of God before, never been to a church before, don't know the first thing about like prayer or the Bible. So yeah, I'm excited by what Justin Brierley has uncovered, and interesting to hear you're sort of saying, yeah, he's onto something here.
I think so, and I think we could see the evaporation of cultural Christianity. I think we're going to see like sort of the more of like people are against faith, and then people are unashamedly a Jesus person.
Right. Well, my final question is, what are you working on now? Are you working on another book, another program, a 28-day fast of some other sort?
So I just released a workbook for the digital fast. It's called the Digital Fast Workbook. And that just came out a few days ago. And so that getting that out as a tool, I want the digital fast to be not just putting down something, but picking something up. Fasting has always been about not just a withdrawal, but it is an engagement in something. And so it is a very analog kind of a guide. What I'm really focusing on in 2025 is trying to share this message with as many churches specifically as possible, and trying to offer a guide to them to do this. The digital fast ended up being one of the most transformative things that we've ever done, and we now do it annually. This is not like a one and done. This is like for the season of Lent every year, we do a digital fast. And
that is our plan. And I know that we are ordering your book. So
right.
Christ Church, those listening to this podcast at Christ Church, we are going to do Dr. Whitehead's digital fast this Lent. And we'll have those notebooks. And so we will walk through this. So Darren, thank you so much for lending some time to us today. God bless you in your ongoing work. And thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Mike.